Our next presentation is titled Maximizing Potential, Key Concepts for Building Resilience in Children, Families, and Communities. Today we have Dr. Jacquelyn Christensen. She received her doctoral degree in Applied Developmental Psychology from Claremont. As the Early Intervention Training Institute coordinator at LA Child Guidance Clinics, she brings high-quality 0 to 5 focus trainings to staff in LA and surrounding counties. Using her expertise on self-regulation and the impact of trauma on children, she developed curriculum for workshops on challenging behavior intervention, typical and atypical development, and the impact of domestic violence and trauma on child development. Dr. Christensen serves as adjunct faculty at Woodbury University and previously at Pitzer College, and also provided day treatment services for emotionally disturbed children at LACGC and the HELP Group. Her research includes meta-emotion and parent-child interaction in toddlers, as well as non-suicidal self-injury in early adolescence with a focus on sensory processing, self-regulation, and trauma. Please welcome Dr. Christensen.
All right, so it's not really morning yet. Still, it's almost afternoon. So my name is Dr. Jacquelyn Christensen. I don't think I've ever had anyone read my bio first, so that's kind of exciting. And when I walked in here today, the first word that came to my mind was fancy. It is super fancy in here, so well done to all of you. And thank you to LA Best Babies Network for inviting me to speak. So I'm going to start by giving you sort of a funny metaphor for how I view child development. And then we'll sort of get into the meat and potatoes of what we're going to do today. And then I'll add to this tree that I spontaneously decided to draw, and then we'll go from there. I'm used to having very participatory trainings. I'm used to speaking in classrooms. I love speaking in front of large groups, but it's a little harder to have participation. So I still may ask some questions and expect someone to answer, and you just have to yell. So is anyone from the East Coast? Anyone? Like one person. Seriously? That's it? Okay, wait, 2 people. Woo! Okay, so, go East Coast. So, I'm from South Carolina, and in South Carolina there are hurricanes. And you don't have that problem out here, lucky you. When a hurricane is coming, there's a map. So imagine you have the coastline, and then you have this little sort of swirl that is the hurricane, and it's sort of coming toward land. And when they draw a trajectory for a hurricane, the path is kind of narrow, and then it gets wider and wider and wider, because they don't really know where it's going to go. They can do their best to predict where it's going to go. But there's so many factors as to where that hurricane is going to land. And so they have to just draw it wider. And so there could be a strong wind from the south, and it could go more north. There could be some sort of pressure system from the top, and it could head more south. When I was in one of my developmental classes in graduate school, I very much upset one of my professors when I said, I think psychologists are like weathermen. And she said, what? And I said, well, what we're trying to do is predict behavior based on past information, which is what a weatherman does. I said, and I very much have decided that child development, looking at a child's trajectory, is like predicting the path of a hurricane. And some children are kind of like hurricanes. They sort of come in and you don't know what happened to your room. But it's not a prescribed path. There's a general trajectory. We have some idea, but there's so many little factors that can impact where exactly that child is going to end up. And that's where I want to sort of ground us today, is that there is no set path. No matter what has happened, no matter where that kid has come from, no matter where that family has come from, it's not linear. There's a lot of opportunity for movement and for growth. So, there's a line there. I don't know why it's not showing up. Oh, well, that's fine. There's not supposed to be a line there. It's supposed to say capacity. Maybe it just changed color on me. Resilience should not be should be a verb. And it should be a verb because it's a process and it's an action. It is not one thing. It's not something that you have or you don't have. Everyone has the possibility for resilience. It's an innate capacity. Everybody comes with it. It's evolutionary. It's part of our biology. So we are built to positively adapt to whatever situation we're put in. And sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's not, but that's what we're meant to do. So when we think about resilience, it's really this verb. So I don't like reading off slides, but I am going to read this one just on principle, which is that resilience does not come from rare and special qualities, but from everyday magic of ordinary, normative human resources in the minds, brains, and bodies of children, in their families and relationships, and in their communities. And that was said by Ann Maston, and she does a lot of work on resilience. And the theme for today, when they asked me to do this, they said, you know, our entire theme is about resilience, and so we would love for you to just sort of talk about it. I said, well, there's so much to talk about in an hour and a half. I'll do what I can. So, though there's going to be some more technical-ish information in here, think of this more like a pep talk. You guys know all of this stuff. You do. This is the work that you do every day. This is why you're here. In those videos, and I wish that I could go back and pull clips from the videos that we just watched, because as we talk through some of the principles that I'm going to bring up today, you will notice so many of those things were in those videos that we saw. So many of them. It's amazing. Those families are resilient. All families are resilient. They just have to have the right opportunity. So, how do we know that? How many of you have heard of the Kauai longitudinal study? Okay, how many people have been to Kauai? There you go. Yeah. Okay. So Kauai is my favorite island in Hawaii, and I think we should all go there right now. But in 1955, Emmy Warner and Ruth Smith set out on what would be the largest longitudinal study of its kind. And it was 698 families that they recruited to track them from pregnancy for the next 40 years. By the way, what a career decision. I'm going to do this for the next 40 years. This is going to be my career. All right, get some funding, do it. So Emmy Warner's at UC Davis, and that was her career. She set out to do this enormous longitudinal study. And the coolest thing about that study is that she didn't have very high attrition, meaning a lot of people didn't drop out. She was able to track a good number of folks over their lifespan. She picked an island specifically because she knew a lot of them would stay in one place, and some of them did move to the mainland, and she was able to track, a lot of them there as well. But what she was really looking for was what risk factors are going to change that trajectory. Is it a path that's sort of determined from birth, or are there other influences that are going to make a difference? And so if you look at this lovely pie chart, you see the birth cohort. That's that first. Oh, good, this works on here. Yesterday I presented at Northridge Hospital their Welcome Baby program. There they are. And they had a TV screen, so the laser pointer doesn't work on a TV screen. I've learned things. So here you see that about a third of the kids were considered high risk. And what do we mean by high risk? Well, we mean that they either were in poverty, maybe there was substance use by the parents, maybe there were mental health issues or some other psychopathology issues of the parents, or some level of perinatal stress, maybe some form of early trauma. So they sort of operationalize what do we consider being at risk in infancy. And so they determined that about a third of those babies were born into situations where they were considered high risk. And then by age much attrition. So it started with 698, then they were at 614, which is great 18 years later. From a research standpoint, that makes me really excited. But I kind of nerd out on those things, so that's fine. So they were then looking at what are they calling risk behaviors in adolescence, because again, sort of thinking of that hurricane, if you said, okay, well you had all these problems early on, does that mean it's just going to follow you throughout your life? And of that first third, about a third of them, they just started having normal outcomes like everyone else, positive relationships, succeeding in school, on a positive life trajectory. And so it was really only these two little slices of the pie here that were still engaged in health risk behaviors. So delinquency, having mental health problems, engaging in early sexual behavior, having teen pregnancy, etc. So then she kept following them. She tracked them again at age 32, she tracked them at age 40. And the coolest part is that, again, looking at all the different outcomes she was looking at, the number of people that were considered still being quote-unquote high risk, involved with the law, having mental health problems, having financial issues, etc., had gone down to just one little bit. And of that original third, 2/3 of that was now on a positive track. 2/3 of those people were doing great. And what she found in common, and this is not going to surprise anyone. By the way, my presentation is not full of surprises. You're all going to be like, yes, all of that makes perfect sense to us. That's why we're here. Common denominator? Relationships. Right? Not surprised. See how much lack of surprise is on your face. They had either found a positive relationship through marriage or being with someone. They had found a good job or done something vocational, gone through some sort of training or gone back to school. They had become involved with some sort of spiritual or religious organization. All three of those things scream the word community, relationships, inclusion, involvement with other people. And that's what was happening. They found that social support. And what we heard in that video this morning was just that. I know I could do it by myself, but what you guys have brought to me is that I don't have to do it by myself. And what Warner and Smith's research show is that no, they don't have to do it by themselves, and when they don't do it by themselves, and when they get the support, they flourish, right? That hurricane trajectory goes right up and, I don't know, hits Maine or something. It leaves South Carolina out of it. Which, sorry for the people in Maine, but at least I'm okay. So, how many of you have heard the dandelion orchid metaphor? A couple of you? Okay. So I'm going to take a poll. It's hard for me to see you because there's these blinding sort of things happening. How many of you have ever tried to take care of an orchid? And how many of you were successful? Well done. Well done. I'm giving you all my orchids. I don't want them, but if I got them, I'll give them to you. Is it easy to take care of an orchid? No, why not? They're sensitive. They need special soil, special water. You have to talk to them nicely. Maybe, I don't know. Just no matter what you do, it requires so much care and effort to take care of an orchid. But when they do grow, they're beautiful, right? They're gorgeous. There's a woman in my office who's somehow very successful with them. And I was walking by and I'm like, wow, I admire your ability to do that. And I admire that orchid. Okay, now, on the opposite side of the spectrum, how many of you tried to kill dandelions? With everything. You can buy all of the chemicals that Lowe's will give you, but it will not kill the dandelions. I don't think they need soil. I don't think they need water. I don't think they need light. They could probably grow in the back of a dark closet somewhere. Dandelions will grow no matter what you do to them. You can kick them, you can throw things at them, you can hold them out of the ground and they'll just grow in your hand. Like they will grow anywhere. one of the conferences years ago. And I thought it was so brilliant because it's a metaphor for, and there's a spectrum, there's lots of other flowers between dandelions and orchids, but it's this metaphor for there's this potential for beauty, there's a potential for success, but we need the right environment and care, right? And I'm not going to get into a nature-nurture debate here. It's not a debate anymore, it's an and. But there's something to be said for goodness of fit. Okay? And finding a way for a child to have the best fit possible will help that child be as successful as possible. Doesn't mean they can't do it otherwise, just means it's going to be a lot harder for them and for the people around them. But all of them, whether a child is a dandelion, orchid, and I don't know, a rose bush, we can compare children to flowers all day. Whatever kind of flower that child is, the better fit they have, the more support they have, the better they're going to do. Okay? And I think it's a good one sometimes, you don't want to say to a parent, well, I think your kid's an orchid, so good luck. You don't want to do that. But I think just in the back of your mind to know, you know what, this is a kid who's going to need extra support. He or she is going to just be the type of kid that, the littlest thing will go wrong, and they'll fall down. Yes, you're raising your hand. Do you have a question? You trying to get someone's attention? Okay, good. Someone's trying to get your attention. All right. So, no matter... Now I've embarrassed her. So that no matter what happens to that child, if the littlest thing could go wrong and they just crumble, and they're just going to need extra support. And there's other kids that, there's family deaths, there's maybe abuse, there's poverty, and those kids come out on top every single time, right? And we know that there's that variation. And so we just kind of have to keep that in mind that is this a kid that's just going to need extra support, and that's okay. Okay? So, and I love this quote by Bernard Williams, that man never made any material as resilient as the human spirit. And I think that stands true no matter what. So, I'm going to nerd out on you a little bit more. How many of you are familiar with Urie Bronfenbrenner and the bioecological model? Good, okay, so some of you. So, this is, I'm not going to go crazy into detail on this, but what we know that no child is an island. We know that every child exists in the context of a relationship. And we know from the work of Arnold Samaroff and many others that development is transactional. And what that means is that the child influences their environment, and that environment influences the child. And it goes back and forth, and it's a circle. And it goes up different levels and down different levels. And we know, due to research that has come out in the past 20 years, that it influences children all the way down to their genetics. It doesn't just stop at behavior, it changes their gene expression. But we also know that that child has an influence on their environment. Again, this goes back to goodness and fit. So if you have a child who maybe is just difficult to soothe and cries a lot, and you have a very sensitive mother, and she starts to internalize it, and she takes it kind of personally, and what am I doing wrong? And then maybe she gets frustrated, and she doesn't feel like she knows how to help her child, which then only frustrates the child, and then you get this circle, right? And then we have to figure out how to help them break that cycle. Or you have beautiful circles, too, right? Where you have this baby who's just gloriously happy to exist, and the mother's gloriously happy to have said baby, and they just, they totally hit it off, and that's great. And every child's different, so, you never know what you're going to get. It's like a box of chocolates. So, every child, really cute chocolates. Every child sits in the middle of this system, and all of the individuals that interact with that child are part of that child's microsystem. So their parents, their peers, their siblings, you guys, anyone who directly interacts with that child is influencing that child's development. That little tiny hurricane, they're influencing what direction that child is going to go. So the more support, more positive support that child has here in the middle, the better things are going to be for that kid. But that's not where it stops, because we know that even that small unit of close people that are influencing that child, it doesn't end there. All of those factors are sitting within a larger context, and that's in this case called the exosystem. So that might be the school system, it might be the fact that First 5LA and LABBN have come together and they're funding this idea of home visiting programs, right? So the entity of home visiting programs and Welcome Baby is part of the exosystem. It's this sort of larger construct, right? And then the individuals within that interact with each individual child, and that takes you back into the microsystem. So the fact that in Los Angeles that there is funding to do that is a factor that influences then directly a child that's sitting in the middle of this system. If you go, and so neighborhoods are their media, the parents' work environment, and if you go out even bigger, you have things like laws, culture at large, social systems. So an example would be something like, something that I hope gets on the table and stays on the table politically, which is about maternity leave, right? And if you think through the trajectory, maternity leave and whether or not that's a federal mandate is way out here. But it influences every child at the individual level, right? Because if you are a child born here versus a child born in like Norway or something, you like a year off, which is amazing. That's two different trajectories for those kids. You could take the same kid and put them in those two different situations. You're going to get two different sets of outcomes, right? So we know that it's the entire context that's going to make a difference. So I'm going to walk through different types of protective factors today, because that's really about how we build resilience in children, and how we promote it. And they all come with it. We're not giving it to them, they have it. What we're really doing is helping to cultivate it. So, oh, there's some arrows, there you go. So, we're going to move through different types of protective factors. We're going to move through personal protective factors, familial and relational protective factors, school protective factors, and community protective factors. Everything that we're talking about today actually comes from one of our longer workshops that we have. We have a whole full-day workshop on this. So you guys are getting the super, condensed version. So just go with it. Know that there's a lot more to it than this. And so in the full version, one of the things that I spend a lot more time on is risk factors. And this idea that there are so many different types of risk factors for children, and again, because of individual differences, different risk factors are going to have different impacts on kids. Some of what we know from research that started in the 70s, went through the 80s and 90s, and they've even done sort of similar studies since, is that cumulative risk factors are much more damaging than singular ones. So when you have 2, 3, 4, 5 risk factors, it compounds exponentially upon that child and weighs very heavily. So if the child is a flower, it's like putting a bucket of rocks on top of where that child is going to have to grow, and that child has to fight extra hard. And if that child is an orchid, that's really, really hard for that child. And if that child's a dandelion, they don't care about the rocks. Move those rocks over and grow on top of the rocks. So the way that we can combat these risk factors, because there's always going to be risk factors. I'm sure most of you have experienced some type of risk factors. We all have, at varying degrees and levels. But the best way to combat them, and I'm sure, again, preaching to choir on this one, is through protective factors, right? And really building and supporting protective factors. So there's lots of different research on protective factors. And so this comes from a book that's entitled something to the effect of Resilience in Children, and it's got some title. And if you really want it, it's by Bernard, 2004. You can look it up. But we also combine that with a little bit of the strengthening families approach. Are you guys familiar with strengthening families? Yeah? So strengthening, I hope so for a lot of you. And strengthening families, again, their entire MO is about building those protective factors. And one of the, and I don't have this slide in here, but as I was sort of, this whole presentation actually came out of a conversation a year ago with a woman named Diane, who also has a home visiting program. I don't know if Diane is here. But she said, you know what we really need? We really need a training about resilience and protective factors. And I said, okay, let me see what I can do. So we worked on that. So in some of the research as we put it together, I came across a wonderful program called Circle of Courage. And it's very much grounded in Native American philosophy that around building community and building relationships. And it's a model for social change, and it's the foundation of programs they use to help at-risk adolescents. And what's really cool about it is there are 4 pieces to their circle. And those 4 pieces, even though they probably didn't read this book, map onto these 4 things, which is awesome. So you'll see on the slides that I have next that I bring up the principles from Circle of Courage as well. Because I think they come from a more communalistic perspective, less of an individualistic perspective. So depending on your cultural lens or where you're coming from, I think it's important to remember that at the end of the day, building personal protective factors, no matter where you're at, no matter what type of family you're working with, it's kind of a universal principle. It really is. And as a quick aside, my brother is really against saying universal because we really don't know how aliens feel about things. So I'll say global. It's really more of a global principle. It's presumptive for me to believe that the resilience principles also apply to people in outer space. I don't know. So the 4 things that I'm going to go over in some level of detail that they have really winnowed down and said these are the things that we really know are going to help kids pull through those rocks. Okay? Our social competence, problem solving, autonomy, and sense of purpose. Now before I dig into all of them, I want you to just sit for a second and think about what those things mean. Yes, they are words in a slide with some cute pictures. But in your own life, how have you been able to build these things in yourself? What people in your early childhood, in your adolescence, even now, the relationships that you're making now, help you with these 4 things? Seriously, I'm going to stop for like 10 seconds and make you think about it. Do you see how these 4 things help you? And that these are 4 things that you're probably bringing to the moms that you work with, and you're modeling some of these things for them, and to the dads, and to aunts and grandmothers, and whoever you're in the room with. And that ultimately you're modeling that for those caregivers so they can model these things for their children and help these 4 characteristics grow within their children to give them a better chance at being successful. So let's talk about each of them a little bit. So back to that circle of courage piece, the matchup there between social competence and generosity. And I love, and I'm going to, again, I'm just going to read this one quote. It says, for generosity, you should be able to give away your most cherished possession without your heart beating faster. And that's by a Lakota elder. And the Lakota Blackfoot tribe is in the northern mid part of the United States. And I love that. That is a wonderful definition of generosity. And it ties so nicely to this idea of social competence. And we are looking for social competence so early. So the first thing up there says responsiveness. We expect that a baby be able to start, within those first 3 months, engaging in a reciprocal way, at least a little bit, maintaining eye contact, crying so that they can get attention, responding to the touch of their caregiver, right? These things start super, super early. So the responsiveness is critical because, and again, from an evolutionary standpoint, we're social beings. It's what we do. We survive best when we're around other people. We are biologically programmed not just to survive, but to be social. We have mirror neurons, in fact, which is why you can stick your tongue out at a baby who's a week old. What is that baby going to do? Stick their tongue right back at you. Not because they just thought, oh, there's this person, stick their tongue at me. Why don't I do that as well? No. It's because the neurons in their brain are programmed to do what they see and make their body do it because they're learning to be social. So responsiveness is a huge part of building social competence. Children have to learn how to communicate. And one of the things that I love about how this is conceptualized in this framework is that the goal of learning to communicate is learning how to do so, how to convey your needs, desires, wants, opinion, whatever, without hurting someone else. And that's really the goal of good communication, is how do we tell someone, hey, this is what I'm thinking, without hurting someone. And it's really hard when you're tiny. Usually it may come with some sort of swat or crying, or when they get a little older we say, oh, those aren't nice words, here's how you have to say it. We start modeling very early what are the appropriate ways to convey your needs. And even as an adult, think about your own adult relationships. I bet some of your less successful relationships were probably because you guys hurt each other with your words, right? You weren't able to communicate successfully without hurting someone. Empathy is huge. I don't think I need to go on too much about that one, but you see that there are children who are able, sometimes more naturally than other children, to just go in and feel for someone else and really be there for someone else. There's a video I don't have time to show today. Have you guys ever seen that video, You Poked My Heart? Maybe? So there's two little children, there are three. They're little, they're probably 2.5 to 3, and they're arguing, two of them. A little boy and a little girl, and the little girl says, it's sprinkling. And the little boy says, no, it's raining. And the little girl says, no, my mom says it's sprinkling. And the little boy says, no, my mom says it's raining. So they're having a wonderful argument about whether it's sprinkling or raining outside. But there's a little girl standing in between them, and the two girls are actually twins, but the little girl standing between them is kind of watching this like tennis match. And at one point, the little girl is kind of frustrated. She breaks boundary and she pokes him kind of in the eye. And he's like, ow! And the little girl says, say sorry. And then she looks at him, are you okay? And what I love about that video, and there's a lot more to it than that, but what I love about that, the little girl in the middle, she has empathy, right? Immediately we see that one of her strong suits is she sees what's happening. She doesn't like the fact that he just got poked. She doesn't really like the fact that her sister poked. She's really understanding the complexity of this, and she even uses problem solving. And she's like, well, go outside. Well, look, you'll see that it's sprinkling. But she wants to empirically test it. Problem solving skills, which we're going to talk about next. Amazing, right? So she's probably kind of dandelionish, that child, right? The other two, they're still working on it, and that's okay, but maybe they could use a little bit more support. And so then we really are looking to build compassion and altruism and teaching kids that it's okay to give. I hear some parents say that, they really encourage their kids to, even when they don't have much, to give things to other people, right? And that if you're part of a larger community, it's not all about mine. It's about what can I do that's going to help all of us move forward, right? And instilling that as early as possible means that you're going to have a child that's going to be more likely to contribute to society in the future. And that's, you know, kind of the last point of generativity, is making that contribution to another human life, right? Making a positive impact on someone else. And I think, again, if you think about why you went into this field, why you do what you do, I can even reflect on my own intention being in high school and thinking to myself, I want to make sure that I make a positive impact on at least one other person. That was the goal I set out on. I must have been like 15 or 16 years old. And then when I did that, I was like, well, that's good. This person says that I positively influenced them. That was kind of nice. Maybe I'll do it to like 5 people, right? That's what I'd like to do. And then when I started working in day treatment and a child development program and really being able to watch these children grow, I was like, I want to help more kids be able to do this. That might ask way too many questions. I'm an evaluator at heart, so I was like, why are we doing this in the program? How is this working? Where's this data going? Who's reading these notes? And everybody's like, we don't know, just play with them or something. So I ended up in evaluation and administration on the back end because I wanted to keep making a difference, but on a much, bigger scale. And today is a great example of that. I mean, you guys are all going to take the information that you're hearing today and take it back and share and make a positive difference. So you all have this, and you're sharing it with your families. Next one is problem solving. And I know that in a very Western sort of perspective, we think of problem solving in a more test-taking sort of way. I know you guys don't, but a lot of people tend to think of problem solving in a test-taking sort of way. But then all of a sudden we have this shift in curriculum to, actually it's really about critical thinking, right? And we're trying to get people to think more deeply about problems. But I think no matter where you are in the world, your ability to use the resources that you have at hand is what's going to get you pretty far. So the ability to plan. And again, developmentally, we talk about executive function and children's ability to sort of sequence events and go, okay, this is what I'm going to have to do to make this happen. And even with little ones that we're working with, being a great model for planning is important. And we are also aware that a lot of the parents that we work with have difficulties in executive function. And so we could either get frustrated that they're not able to make appointments on time, or that they have a hard time showing up when they say they're going to, or that they say they're going to try something and they don't. And we can write it off as, we can take it personally. Why aren't they investing more in this? Why don't they care? But the flip side of that is maybe they also are having some problems with executive function and planning, and maybe they need support in that area. And if we give them support, we might see a world of difference in their ability to engage. So you guys have to be great models for building planning and for being flexible. We know that children who get stuck in a particular way of thought have a much harder time. I'll pick on my cousin for a second. My aunt is fairly rigid. I love her dearly, but she's a little rigid. And my poor cousin, when he was like, I don't know how old he was, he must have been like 3 or 4. My mother was watching him, he burst into tears. It was like 6:05, and he's like, it's after 6 o'clock, we can't have dinner. It's over, dinner time is over. And my mother was like, we can still have dinner. It's okay. He said, but dinner's at 5:30, and now it's not 5:30, now we can't have dinner. He's okay now. He did go to MUD, he's a computer programmer, I'm not shocked by this. He's doing great, but he was not very flexible. He needed a lot of support in being flexible, right? He was a little bit orchid-ish in that way. He just wasn't able to sort of move on from that. And, that's a very targeted example. And I'll let him know that I picked on him. But being flexible in so many ways. Being flexible with expectations. Being flexible with what we're going to get or not get. then there's resourcefulness. And when I was a kid, I don't think my dad knew that I would ever actually quote him. I should probably tell him. He said, everything you need is in your reach. Which was a really, it seems like a simple statement, but I challenge all of you, like for the next 2 days, think of that statement, and the next time you're like, oh, you will find whatever you're trying to do. We were eating, I don't know, chips or something the other day, and I was like, do you have a clip to close the chips? And he was like, no. I was like, well, do you have a binder clip? He's like, oh yeah, I have office supplies. Great, get a binder clip. You know, like, there's a flexibility there, but also a willingness to see the world in a different way and creatively use the resources that are available to you. And I think my dad usually meant it because he's an engineer and we would always be out in his shop building things. And so if we didn't quite have the right part, we would just have to find something that would fit. I also do welding, so I build lamps. But I took that to heart. And it wasn't until I was way older that I realized how much I took that to heart. And it's giving children and giving families those little tiny nuggets that they can just hold on to and hold on whenever they need them. And resourcefulness is such an important one. And then we've already briefly discussed critical thinking, but I think it ties here to the circle of courage principle, which is mastery. And so we want children to be able to become confident, to solve problems. We want them to be able to overcome challenges. We don't want them to get to a spot where they go, this looks high. I don't know how to get over it. This barrier is too big. I guess I'll turn around. Right? When they're children, adults are supposed to help them get over that wall. We'll watch a video that sort of shows that in a little while. But as they get older, we're hoping that they want to solve those problems on their own, to figure out how to get over that wall, or dig through it, or go around it, or whatever they have to do. My brother also resilient in that way, in terms of problem solving. Once he had to get a spanking, and he knew, and I don't advocate spanking, I can't judge my parents for what they did, but he knew that he was going to get one, and he ran out of the room, and he came back in with about 8 pairs of Superman underwear on. And he's like, I'm ready. And at that point, the spanking didn't happen, because my dad was laughing way too hard. He was just like, that was genius, and well done. Dandelion. That one. And he's just that kind of kid. He's an adult now, he's a medical school, but that kind of kid. So then there's autonomy. So, biologically, we're also programmed to go out and do our own thing. We're not supposed to just stay home the whole time. We're supposed to become individuals that are capable of carrying on to the next generation. So, part of that, though, is it's hard to be autonomous if you don't have a good sense of self. If you're constantly sort of insecure or worried that you're not going to be a successful member of society. So, part of the way we do this is by promoting independence. And so if we start with the circle of courage there, again, it's a little overlap with solving problems, but it's about increasing your inner discipline and building your sense of self-efficacy. How much you think you're able to do something, how confident you are in being able to do something. And we're thinking of children, but this is also parents. When that mother said, I knew that I could kind of do it on my own, but now that I've had her help me, I feel so much more confident being able to do it on my own. Or the couple, the young couple, and she said, I wasn't doing okay with breastfeeding, but then once I knew that I could use the bobby pillow and sort of position him right, I was able to do it. That's self-efficacy. Her home visitor helped her with her self-efficacy about being able to support her child's nutrition. That's a super basic need right there, right? Being able to support her child's nutrition. And if you don't even think you can do that, how's your self-efficacy? Probably not great, right? So, however we're able to build that in children is, and parents, is going to be critical for their sense of autonomy. And this also involves being able to sort of, especially for adults, to look at their past, like the mother who said, you know, yes, my kids are taken away from me, but I've been able to learn from it, and I'm going to grow from it. And in fact, I'm going to become a counselor, right? She developed a sense of self-efficacy and autonomy through her experiences and through the supports that she received in these programs. And having a sense of self-awareness, mindfulness, and a sense of humor. Life is not serious. There's way too much that goes on for it to be serious. It should not be taken that seriously. I mean, you should take it seriously that you only have one and you should do the best you have with it. But the flip side of that is you can't just kind of mope around the whole time. I mean, there's a lot of fun to be had. And so you can either reflect negatively on what's happening, or you can find humor in what's happening. And so being able to model for children and model for parents when something kind of bad is happening, to make a joke, or to see the best in it. And again, we know that temperament says there are people who are more likely to do that, and people who are less likely to do that. We like categorizing people. Oh, you must be a pessimist. Oh, you must be an optimist. And then people take it on as their self-identity. I'm a pessimist. This is just always how I'm going to be, and nothing is ever funny. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. And so that or it needs a little more work. I bet there's not too many pessimists in here. I have a feeling. I don't know, I could poll you later. But I have a feeling most of you are pretty optimistic. Or you wouldn't be in this field. You'd walk up to it and be like, well, that's depressing. And then you'd probably walk away. But most of you see the hope and are inspired to keep doing the work that you do. And you find humor, and families find humor in their situations. Then next is sense of purpose. And somewhere in here, I'm going to touch a little bit on flow. Just check my good. We very much, in a community, we need to feel like we belong. Remember I said we're social creatures. That's what we do. We are meant to be social. We are meant to be part of a group. We're social animals. I have a textbook that says so. It's called The Social Animal. It's gone through several editions. I started the psychology club at my university when I was in college, and we called it The Social Animals. We are meant to be social, and we are meant to feel like we have a purpose and a role within our society. So, having a goal, as little as that, even if it's a little goal, is the seed, right? It's going to plant this seed that we hope will grow. And giving even very young children little tiny goals. Okay, come get the ball. That's a goal. If they do it, hooray! I mean, what do we do for kids when they meet these tiny goals? We lose our mind. Oh, yay! Right? And then all of a sudden our enthusiasm drops off when they're like 7. And then we're just like, yeah, you did it. You know, this. And I'm not saying, I'm also not on board with give kids certificates for everything. I don't think that helps. Not at all. But I do think helping kids have goals and feeling a sense of satisfaction and self-worth and belonging when they're able to meet those goals is an important personal protective factor. Creativity. Did you ever notice that most artists came from really crappy backgrounds? I'm not saying that there aren't happy artists out there, but I will say that a lot of the artists that you meet, especially very famous ones, you hear about their life and you're like, oh my God. And then you realize this is their way. This is how they have learned to grow and be more like a dandelion. They said, you know what, this is how I'm going to channel everything that I need to do, and I'm going to be creative. And so we very much encourage creativity and encourage families to be creative, encourage parents to be creative with themselves and with their kids. And this also relates a little bit actually back to the mindfulness piece with Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Do not make me spell his name. It's really long. He's Hungarian. He also teaches at Claremont Graduate University, and he is considered the father of flow and creativity. And flow is a state that, is there anything that you do, think about what you like to do, is there anything that you like to do that you just lose track of time doing? You know, whether it's cooking, maybe it's painting, for me it's welding, anything that, I'm sorry video, I'm sorry. Okay. Started without me. I wasn't very ready yet. Anything you like to do where you just kind of go into quote-unquote a zone, right? That's flow. And flow is actually a really healthy state for your brain. And so the more we can get kids in areas where they feel flow, the better. So encouraging more of that creativity is going to be important. And lastly, of course, is spirituality. And having a sense of optimism and hope, something bigger, knowing that there's something bigger than yourself, is a huge protective factor. Be related somehow to everyone you know. I think is the best way that that's verbalized, that sense of belonging and purpose. Okay, now we're watching.
Science tells us that the experiences we have in the first years of our lives actually affect the physical architecture of the developing brain. This means that brains aren't just born, they're also built over time based on our experiences. Just as a house needs a sturdy foundation to support the walls and roof, a brain needs a good base to support all future development. Positive interactions between young children and their caregivers literally build the architecture of the developing brain. Building a sturdy foundation in the earliest years provides a good base for a lifetime of good mental function and better overall health. So just how is a solid brain foundation built and maintained in a developing child? One way is through what brain experts call serve and return interactions. Imagine a tennis match between a caregiver and a child, but instead of hitting a ball back and forth across a net, various forms of communication pass between the two. From eye contact to touch, from singing to simple games like peekaboo. These interactions, repeated throughout a young person's developing years, are the bricks that build a healthy foundation for all future development. But another kind of childhood experience shapes brain development too, and that's stress. Good kinds of stress, like meeting new people or studying for a test, are healthy for development because they prepare kids to cope with future challenges. Another kind of stress, called toxic stress, is bad for brain development. If a child is exposed to serious, ongoing hardships like abuse and neglect, and he has no other caregiver in his life to provide support, the basic structures of his developing brain may be damaged. Without a sturdy foundation to properly support future development, he is at risk for a lifetime of health problems, development issues, even addiction. It's possible to fix some of the damage of toxic stress later on, but it's easier, more effective, and less expensive to build solid brain architecture in the first place. One of the things that sturdy brain architecture supports is the development of basic emotional and social skills, an important group of skills which scientists call executive function and self-regulation can be thought of like air traffic control in the child's mental airspace. Think of a young child's brain as the control tower at a busy airport. All those planes landing and taking off and all of the support systems on the ground simultaneously demand the controller's attention to avoid a crash. It's the same with a young child learning to pay attention, plan ahead and remember, and follow lots of rules. Like all of us, kids have to react to things happening in the world around them, while also dealing with worries, temptations, and obligations on their minds. As these demands for attention pile up, air traffic control helps a child regulate the flow of information, prioritize tasks, and above all, find ways to manage stress and avoid mental collisions along the way. Having this ability is a necessity for positive and level mental health. Developing effective air traffic control, overcoming toxic stress, and building solid brain architecture are things kids can't do on their own. And since strong societies are made up of healthy, contributing individuals, it's up to us as a community to make sure all young people have the kinds of nurturing experiences they need for positive development. To build better futures, we need to build better brains.
So that's from Center in Alberta, but again, I think it's all stuff that you know, but all of those personal protective factors that we talked about, I think one of the things you have to remember is those aren't just things, they're not just like these ephemeral concepts. When you strengthen those things, you're strengthening actual synaptic connections in the brain. You literally are laying a structural foundation for those things to be stronger later. So let's move on really quick, because we're going to get through the other ones. I spend a lot of time, I think, on those personal ones, because I think those are the ones that influence all of the rest of them. So when we think about family relationships, school, community, these are three overarching factors that need to be prioritized. So one is caring relationships, which we talked about. The other one is that there's high expectations for that person to contribute and be a member of society. And that when we do have high expectations, that there are opportunities for a child to participate and to contribute. So these things are true in home, in the school, and in the community. So in the Kauai longitudinal study, they found that, not surprisingly, having less children in the home was a little more protective because of resources, right? And so we can know that there's not much that you and I can necessarily do about that, but I think it just speaks to this idea of a parent's attention is a limited resource. There's only one of them. Maybe there's two of them. Sometimes there's many of them. The more of them, the better. Because that parent can only divide themselves up so many ways. So when we're thinking of how a family can support a child, you're going to need more resources if there's more kids. We do know, again, in the study, that an opportunity to develop a close relationship with at least one adult and receive positive attention is going to be important. I think we all know that one. But I think, again, in the lands of that sort of hurricane trajectory, it's not always a straight line. So on the slide is an example of like children from divorce, that most of them turn out just fine. And in that Kauai study, even though they came from high-risk birth and early infancy situations, most of them turn out just fine. So I think the work that you're doing is only supporting the fact that many of those kids will probably, this isn't to say that you don't have a purpose, probably a good majority of those kids are going to turn out okay anyway, because that's what we're built to do. But you guys are also there to catch the ones that might not, right? And add that other layer of support. So we can be a supportive relationship for the caregivers. Caregivers are going to be a supportive relationship for the kids. It's all going to be very circular. I'm going to move past this one really quick and sort of go on to this one. This is also from Strengthening Families, so most of you are probably familiar with this. But we know that these are the factors that get measured when they're looking at a parent's capacity, I should say, to be as supportive as possible. So one of the factors is knowledge of parenting and child development. And so that's where you guys come in, often, right? Is being able to provide psychoeducation, to do the ages and stages, to give them the next interval of ages and stages so the parent knows what to expect, to just tell them like, hey, you know what, this is normal, this is okay. Normalize a lot of things for those parents. Because parenting doesn't come with a manual, and it probably shouldn't, because every kid is different. But at the same time, there's a lot of variation in the world in terms of parenting knowledge. And one of the things that I think is helpful yet scary, where do a lot of parents get their parenting information? TV and internet. I'm sure someone said internet. Oh, the internet. There's a huge confirmation bias on the internet, which means anything you're looking for, you can find it. If you think that your child should sleep in a pool of, Jell-O with a pad on top of it with golden flakes on his head, I'm sure if you Google it, someone has done it and will say, yes, this is the best thing ever. But, so anything you want to find, if you want to confirm spanking, you can find that. If you want to go against spanking, you can find that. If you want to confirm co-sleeping, you can find it. If you want to confirm not co-sleeping, you can find that too. So the problem is the internet is not a safe place to get information because most people do not think critically enough about what has research validity behind it and what doesn't. So one of the hardest parts, I think, of your job is to sort of come in and combat maybe what they're bringing to the table from their past experiences, combined with what they're getting from friends or family that are telling them, combined with what the internet or the TV is telling them to do. And you guys have a really tricky role of being able to sort of sort through all of that and sift it and go, here's the nuggets, these are the good bits. But that's a really important point of building a resilient family. All these other factors here, you'll notice, link back to those personal protective factors, right? Which is why I spent most of the time on those. So the part of that belonging piece is connected really to social connections and concrete support in times of need. We want to make sure parents have support. So that's the other big thing you do, right? You guys provide support that you have, but you also provide linkages and help those families find support. I'm actually going to skip this one for the moment so that we have a little more time to move forward. That other video is from the Harvard Center for the Developing Child. If you're really excited later and you're like, I want to watch another video. And he's a lovely man, but his voice is a little bit boring, so, don't tell him I said that. But really what that video just says is, we can know all of this stuff about child outcomes, but the fact of the matter is until we're supporting families and supporting communities, it's not going to matter. I can do child development research until the cows come home, but until we're able to put it in practice, it doesn't matter. And so that's what you guys are doing. You're putting all of this research and all of this work into practice and bringing it to families and helping families be more confident in their abilities to raise their children. I know most of the kids you work with are probably not in school yet, but they will be. And for many of the families you work with, I bet there's siblings who do have kids that are in school. So it's important to just keep in mind that school can be a huge protective factor. And I bet most of you can think back in your life to a teacher that maybe made a huge difference for you. I see some of you nodding. I'm trying to think if I can think of a teacher. Miss Algren was my 7th grade grammar teacher. I can diagram sentences really well because of her. If you've never diagrammed sentences, I'm sorry. It's not something you want to do on a regular basis. But I remember that I do have teachers that were awesome and made us do fun things and were really encouraging. My 5th grade teacher was actually in South Carolina. She was Miss Greenwood, and she competed in the Miss South Carolina pageant. So I thought, oh, she's so pretty. But she was so fun. She made it. There was only 7 of us in the class. It was a very small school. So we got to do all sorts of really fun stuff, and I had to learn the presidents' names in order and Constitution. I think I had to memorize part of that. But these are positive memories. I give you this personal example because you guys have these personal examples too, and you can bring those to your families without disclosing too much about yourself. But to be able to say, you know what, I had these supports, and I bet you did too, and helping families realize those strengths that they have either from their past in school or from, maybe they have a child who's in school, and helping that child realize the potential of what support's available in their school. And we also sadly know that when schools fail students, the effects are very detrimental. We do know that preschool expulsion rates are so much higher than K-12 expulsion rates because preschool is not mandatory. So preschools feel, more flexible being able to do that. And unfortunately, because of licensing issues, they often get caught between a rock and a hard place where they're like, you know what, this kid's biting, we can't have this kid here, so, then they get expelled. So we really want to help support parents so that kid is not set up for failure. I remember working with a parent once who said, I know he's only like 3.5, but his preschool teachers are really picking on him, and they say that I need to put him on medication, and I don't know what to do. And I said, let's find him a different school. And so we were able to find him a different school. Nothing. No problems. He's doing great. It's about that goodness of fit, right? It's about those microsystems. It's about who's interacting with that kid. And if it's not a good fit, how do we find a better fit? Okay? Again, promoting those caring relationships, having high expectations. The people who thought that kid should be on meds did not have high expectations for him. They had pretty low ones. So you need to make sure those kids end up in situations where people believe in them and have high expectations for them. And that then, if they become part of that school community, they have opportunities to contribute. This is an example of the Perry Preschool Project, which, again, was a longitudinal study, 35 years, something like that. Again, these people with their careers, by the way, developmental psychologists publish much less than most other psychologists because our research takes so darn long. If you're a social psychologist, you just do some surveys, you write it up, and it's all done. We're like, we just have to wait for children to grow, so I'll get you some data in like 5 years. You can hold on, right? So they did this Perry Preschool Project, and I don't know if you can read it very well, but they have these these markers, so were they arrested 5 or more times by the age of 40? And so in the no program group, so these are kids that didn't get any sort of early preschool program, you see that 55% were arrested 5 times before they were 40, but only 36% of the kids who did have preschool had that issue. Graduated high school, 77% of the kids who attended the Perry Preschool Project graduated high school, whereas only 60% of the kids who didn't have preschool. Now, then you can sort of read the rest of them. I think the IQ one is kind of interesting, though I think there's a lot of biases in IQ testing, but that's another lecture. The Perry Preschool Project, however, is really hard to replicate because that program was really expensive for them to do. That being said, it set the ball in motion for the recognition of the need for early care and early education. And not early education like we're making a bunch of 3-year-olds sit down with textbooks, but that children have a structured space in which they receive support and are given opportunities to thrive and build those protective factors that we talked about earlier. And there's variation in quality, and that's why we're moving to this place of having QRIS systems, and they're having to rate preschools and really look at is everybody doing what they're supposed to do, and that's fine. But I think it got the ball really rolling more than it had been on investing, because what we know is that for every dollar spent on early childhood, we're saving $16 on what would happen if we didn't invest in them early on, which is a huge return on investment. So let's talk about community protective factors. I just list a few things up there. But whenever we get to this point, it's sort of a funny thought because people go, well, I can do those other ones. I got that. I can, personal protective factors, easy. You want me to go work one-on-one with a kid, I can make that happen. You want me to work one-on-one with a parent, I can make that happen. And then we talk about family. Oh, well, yes, of course, I'm supporting the whole family, so we're going to build those protective factors too. And then you say school, and you go, well, I mean, maybe I'm involved in the school system a little bit. I can help get the kid into the right services. I can be part of an IEP or help get the kid into a regional center or something. I can do the school piece. But then when you get to the community piece, everybody kind of goes, I don't know how to change a community. That seems kind of hard. right? And so we sort of view it as this ephemeral, off in the distance sort of thing, but it's not. You, in fact, by going in and working with those individuals, are impacting the community. The fact that there are 450 people in here right now is us impacting the community. This is part of the community. This is a very big part of the community. I mean, I know Los Angeles has like 10 million people in it, so I suppose we're a drop in the bucket in that perspective. We're like a small state. But we're still impacting the community. There's a wonderful example, and a woman named Colleen Mooney, she's at the South Bay Community Counseling Center. And they have been doing amazing work in the South LA, not even South LA, South Bay area. So down near like Long Beach and that whole area. And they tried something new, which I thought was pretty cool. They went into existing meetings, like existing community forums. They introduced themselves and they said, you know, we want to support you. But we're not going to come in here and put our agenda on you. We're not going to come in here and say, this is what you should be thinking about as a community. They came in and said, hey, you guys have this sort of existing group. We're going to actually be putting a few, working with a few different communities. Does anybody want to participate in some community meetings? And the people who were interested were like, yeah, why not? So they started helping sort of shape these community meetings, and then they would sort of step back and they would say, they just provided a little bit of structure. They said, why don't you guys discuss what some priorities for your community are? What's important to you? And so the communities, the individual members from the community were able to have these dialogues, and when they needed, they might ask the folks from SBCC to come in, but mostly SBCC sort of stayed in the back. And they were able to come up with a list of things like, these matter to us. So, for example, one of them was around community safety. And so they discussed community safety and figured out what was a priority, and then they took action steps. They decided they wanted training on certain areas, and they wanted help with certain other things, and these were the things they were going to do. And then some members of that went to one of the other community meetings, and they told one of the other community meetings about what they were doing, and did they want to be a part of it too? Oh yeah, that's a great idea. And it was very organic, and they got stuff done. Not because some entity went in there and said, hey, you guys are going to get stuff done because look, we have this grant, and it's going to be great, and then we're going to get all the funding, and we're going to leave. Instead, the communities decided to do it. Through this program, they've impacted the preschool programs they've had. They have started community gardens. They've started community lending. So they've come up with strategies for helping get small loans for people so that they can do certain things. That's so cool. But it's not because it took tons and tons of work. It was more of a shift in philosophy. And I know that most of you, that's not necessarily a role, and I know that it's hard to go back to your organization and go, guys, I have this idea. And they'd be like, yes, and that's not your program, so go back to your program. But it doesn't mean you can't, again, have that seed planted, right, for community change. And so I drew a tree before I started, because I like trees. They're great. I think we should have more of them. I'm from South Carolina, and again, there's lots of trees. When I got to Los Angeles, I was severely disappointed in the lack of trees. That's okay. If this is the growth of one individual or one family, often we think about what we're doing in early childhood as being down here intervening at the roots, right? And we often think, well, it's a little late if we're going to come in and just do pruning. That's a sort of like rehabilitation model, right? I don't know if you guys can see the board over here, but imagine a tree. That's pretty much what's happening. And I drew an arrow at some roots. Okay. So we figure, well, we're trying to impact these roots, but community change, in my mind, is here. It's in the soil. Because by impacting the soil, we create a healthier place for the children and the families to grow, right? So instead of just thinking about the tree, or the family, or the individual, or the work that you do, which is again really tending to those roots, you guys are doing things like pouring fertilizer on the roots, which is wonderful, right? Maybe you're hugging the tree a little bit, talking to it, giving it some nice light. But by changing the community, even a little bit at a time, you're creating more fertile soil. And that's going to give families an opportunity to be successful and to show and exude their resilience, because they all have it. I think that's probably a pretty good place to stop, because you're all really hungry, I can tell. And I will not stand between you and your food. I hope that this was helpful. I hope that you were able to see how a lot of these principles, even though they come out of research, even though there's books and lots of, empirical articles on all of this, that it relates to the work that you guys are doing every day, and that you can impact the communities that you're working with and create fertile soil and help them from personal to relational to school to community at all of the levels, and be successful and help them be successful. We do, I'm going to be a little bit of a, this is what I do. I'm at LA Child Guidance Clinic. We have some of our home visitors here right now as well. Somewhere, I don't know there. There they are. Hello. The Early Intervention Training Institute does trainings on various topics. We just did a training for Northridge, I mentioned, on typical and atypical development. We love to support the work that you guys are doing so that you guys can go out and provide better support for the families that you work with. So I hope that this information was helpful, and know that if you need me or you're interested in any of the other sort of workshops or training opportunities that we do, we have flyers on the table, and you can always email me if you have questions, and I'm going to hang out with you guys for a while, so if you have any questions for me, I would like to take them. But thank you all so much. You guys are awesome, and I love the work that you do.
So help me thank Dr. Christensen one more time for a great presentation. So as we're definitely trying to do, staying on the agenda, so on time, just a couple announcements before we go to our lunch break. I guarantee you it is not wraps and sandwiches today. I know. You're welcome. The LABBN team spent all night cooking this food. Yeah, right. It would have been I was burning the kitchen probably, because I am a kitchen reject. Lunch needs a couple more minutes to be set up. And, but yeah, feel free to enjoy the photo booth. We'll be getting together at 1:05. Thank you very much.